My name is Ellen May Carter. I turned 67 last fall, and no one called to say happy birthday. No card in the mail, not even a voicemail. I didn't expect anything different. After all, my daughter hasn't spoken to me in 30 years. But yesterday, something strange happened. I got a photo. No message, no explanation, just a photo. And when I saw it, I dropped my teacup right onto the floor. Didn't even hear it break. Just stood there, staring. I'll get to that. But first, I need to tell you how we got here. Because things like this, daughters going silent for decades, they don't just happen for no reason. There's a story, a long one, and it starts with a scream. We were living in a trailer park on the edge of Baton Rouge. Early 90s. My husband, Tommy, was still alive back then. A mechanic by trade, but only when he wasn't too drunk to work. The rest of the time, he'd sit in that busted recliner by the window, chain-smoking and growling at the TV like it owed him money. Our daughter, June, was 16 when she stopped talking to me. One day, she was home late from school, looking like something had shattered inside her, and the next day, she was gone. I woke up and found her room empty, the window wide open, a note on the pillow. Don't come looking, you won't like what you find. I sat there for hours holding that paper, wondering what she meant. I didn't know then. God help me, I didn't know. Or maybe I did and just didn't want to admit it. You see, our house, it wasn't safe. Not for me. And maybe not for her either. Tommy had fists like concrete and a temper that cracked the walls. He never laid a hand on June. Not that I saw. But sometimes she'd flinch when he walked by, and sometimes she wouldn't look him in the eye. I asked her once, just once, June, is your daddy hurting you? She looked at me, quiet, hollow-eyed, and she said, no, Mama, he hurt you instead. That was the last real conversation we ever had. She left the next morning. And I never saw her again. Not at first. Not for decades. The years after that, they're a blur. Tommy died in '99, heart attack in a liquor store parking lot. The EMT said it looked like he was reaching for the bottle, even as he collapsed. I didn't cry. I just cleaned out the trailer, sold it for next to nothing, and moved into a one-bedroom apartment off Jefferson Highway. Quiet place. Friendly neighbors. No memories. I tried calling June for years. Every birthday, every Christmas. I wrote letters, sent cards. Never got one back. And eventually, I stopped. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I just told myself I did, to make the silence hurt less. But then, yesterday, my whole world turned upside down. The mail came late. I almost didn't check it, but something told me to look. Inside the box was a plain envelope. No return address, just my name, E. Carter. And inside, a single photograph. No note, just the photo. It was a girl. A little girl, maybe 7, maybe 8. She had dark curly hair, big brown eyes, and a birthmark just below her left cheek. And I knew that face, because I'd seen it before, in the mirror, not mine, but June's. That photo, it was a child who looked exactly like my daughter did when she was that age. Only the photo wasn't old, it was recent. Taken outside maybe a few weeks ago. You could still see leaves turning behind her, fall colors, northern maybe. I held that photo like it was made of glass, because I knew what it meant. June hadn't just left. She had a daughter, and for the first time in 30 years, she was trying to tell me something. But why now? And what was she trying to say? That's when the phone rang, and the voice on the other end made my blood run cold. The phone rang just once before I answered it. Don't ask me why. Maybe I was still holding that photograph like it might vanish if I looked away too long. Maybe I hoped, Lord, I hoped it was her, but it wasn't. Not exactly. The voice on the other end was male, low, rough. The kind of voice that sounds like it's used to being ignored, so it talks like it doesn't care. Is this Ellen Carter? I hesitated. Yes. Long pause. Then he said, She said you'd probably hang up, but I'm asking you not to. My breath caught. Who is this? I asked. Another pause. Then, I'm a friend of June's. That name, after all those years, just hearing it spoken out loud again felt like getting sucker punched in the ribs. I had to sit down. She's okay, he said quickly, like he could feel me starting to break. She's safe, but she's not ready to talk. Not yet. She asked me to call because something's happened. Something. That word. It can mean a skinned knee or a funeral. I clutched the phone tighter. Is it about the girl in the photo? He exhaled hard, like he was surprised I knew. Yeah, that's her daughter. Her name's Ivy. I closed my eyes. Ivy. I let it settle on my tongue like something holy. My granddaughter. I had a granddaughter, and her name was Ivy. She's 8, he continued. Smart, tough. June says she's got your eyes. My throat burned. I didn't even know he meant it like that. I hadn't seen my own eyes in a long time, just the ones in the mirror, dull and tired. But the thought that June had spoken of me to her daughter, even just once, I could have sobbed right there. I forced myself to breathe. Why now? Why the photo? Why you? Another pause. Then the man said, Because Ivy's in danger. The world shifted. What do you mean, danger? She saw something she shouldn't have, and now they're looking for her. Who is they? But he didn't answer. Or maybe he did, and I just didn't understand it right away. What he said was, June's been running from something for a long time, and it's finally caught up. I wanted to scream, grab him through the phone and shake the answers out. But instead, I asked the only question I could. Where is she? He hesitated. She doesn't want you to come. I don't care. She said you'd say that. There was a rustle on his end. A door opening. The sound of wind. She's in Maine, he said finally. A town called Ashbridge. Population's about 900. No one there asks questions. Until now. Maine? I repeated. That's over 1,000 miles. I know, he said. But if you're going to help, you need to leave now. I stood. My knees popped. My hip ached like it always did in the mornings, but none of it mattered. I'm coming, I said. He didn't argue. He just said, bring the photo. Then the line went dead. And I stood there in the middle of my quiet kitchen, holding a photo of a girl I'd never met, and realizing I was going to war for the child of a daughter who hated me, and I didn't even know why. Not yet. But I would. Because once upon a time, I left June in a house with a man who broke things for fun. And maybe, just maybe, this was my second chance to make it right. I didn't pack much, just a duffel bag, my heart medication, and that photo. I tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat like it was something sacred, because in a way, it was. It was the first proof I'd had in 30 years that my daughter still breathed. I left the apartment just after dawn, left the keys under the mat, just in case I made it back. Left a note for the building manager that just said, gone to see family, don't worry. I'm not sure if that was a lie or the truest thing I've said in decades. The bus to Ashbridge, Maine would take nearly 30 hours with connections through Atlanta and Boston. Long enough to question everything, not long enough to change my mind. I spent the ride thinking about June, trying to remember her laugh, the way she'd braid her Barbie's hair when she was little, so tight the heads would pop off. I remembered the first time she asked me why I didn't leave her father. She was 12. I'd just come out of the bathroom, towel pressed to my split lip. She sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, fists clenched in her lap. And she said, "Mama, if someone hit me, would you still love him?" I froze. She didn't look at me when she said it. She just stared at the floor. And I told her I'd never let anyone hurt her. But I didn't answer the question. Not really. Maybe that's when she started building her exit. I got to Ashbridge after dark. Snow on the ground. Air so cold it cracked my bones when I stepped off the bus. The only street light flickered like it was tired of trying. I expected to feel like a stranger. Instead, I felt watched. Small towns have a way of doing that. I walked to the address the man on the phone had texted before my connection out of Boston. It was a motel, the kind with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that just said tell. One story, no front desk, just numbered doors and the sound of a TV playing too loud in one of the rooms. Door number 7. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder, and then it opened. But it wasn't June. It was Ivy. The little girl from the photo. Only this time she was real, and she was staring at me like I'd just stepped out of a story she'd been told not to believe. "You're her," she said. My heart cracked. "I think I am." She stepped aside to let me in. And that's when I saw her. June, sitting at the table, arms crossed, same defiant tilt of her chin she had when she was 16. But her eyes, God, her eyes, they looked like they hadn't slept in years. We stared at each other. Neither of us spoke, until finally she said, "I told him not to call you." Her voice was cold, flat. I swallowed hard. And he didn't listen. He never does. I stepped forward, slowly, like I might scare her if I moved too fast. "I got the photo," I said. "She's beautiful." "She's none of your business," June snapped. I stopped. Ivy flinched, and suddenly I saw it. The fear, not in my daughter, in my granddaughter. She looked at June the same way June used to look at me, like she was waiting for something to explode. And that's when I realized whatever June had been running from, she hadn't outrun it. She'd become part of it. And the question wasn't just who was looking for Ivy. It was, what had Ivy seen that made June send for the mother she hadn't spoken to in 3 decades? I didn't sleep that night. Ivy did, curled up in the corner of the motel bed, one arm wrapped around a stuffed rabbit whose ears had been chewed nearly flat. I watched her chest rise and fall, slow and peaceful, like none of this was happening, like the danger hadn't already found its way to the door. June sat at the small table by the window, a cigarette burning in her fingers, her other hand shaking just slightly as she scrolled through something on her phone. She didn't look at me once. I sat in the chair across from her, quiet, waiting. She finally spoke just before dawn. "He showed up 3 weeks ago," she said. "Asked for Ivy by name. Said her father owed him something." Her voice was dry, like rusted metal scraping across a fence. I blinked. Ivy's father? What kind of something? June took a long drag, exhaled through her nose. Money, or drugs, or both? I don't even know anymore. I stared at her. "June, what kind of life did you build for her?" She shot me a look. Ice. But there was something behind it, something softer, something cracked. "Not the one I wanted," she whispered. That landed hard. She put the cigarette out in a plastic motel cup. "I met him when I was 20. Thought he was the first man who saw me as more than broken. He wasn't." She laughed once. No humor. "He saw the cracks. He liked them. Made it easier to control. I didn't press. Didn't need to. I knew that kind of man. I'd love that kind of man. Married him. Buried him." June looked at Ivy. She was born in a halfway house outside of Portland. I named her after the only girl who held my hand while I was screaming. Her voice shook. She kept talking anyway. "I stayed clean for 2 years. Then I slipped. He came back. Said he'd help. Said we'd be a family again. You know what he really wanted?" I didn't answer. "Not me," she said. "Not really." He wanted leverage. He wanted something to sell. The silence that followed was thick, ugly. I felt like my lungs had turned inside out. "What happened?" I asked, afraid of the answer. She looked at me. "He tried to take her in the middle of the night, had her half in the car before I woke up. If she hadn't screamed," her voice broke. "I got her back, but he said he'd come again, that I couldn't run far enough. And the man who called me?" June nodded slowly. "Rafe. He's not good, but he owes me." "Owes you?" "I saved his life once. Don't ask." She stood, crossed to the bed, and gently brushed a curl from Ivy's forehead. "She's all I have," she whispered. "And if something happens to me," that's when she turned, looked me dead in the eyes. "I need you to take her." The world dropped out from under me. "What?" "You heard me," she said. "If I don't come back, if something happens, I need you to promise me you'll take her somewhere safe." I was shaking. "June, what are you planning to do?" But she didn't answer. She just walked to the dresser, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me. It was a photo, black and white. Security footage, maybe. It showed a man standing outside a school, staring, smiling. And right there next to the bike rack was Ivy, unaware, a day or two old at most. "Who is he?" I asked. June's lips tightened. "He's not Ivy's father." My heart sank. "He's worse." And that's when she said the name. A name I hadn't heard in decades. A name that should have stayed buried with my past. The man in the photo was someone I knew once, before June was ever born. I stared at the photo in my hands, the world spinning slower than my breath. His name, spoken aloud after all these years, felt like gravel in my mouth. Raymond Goss. June nodded. "That's him," she said. "Goes by Red now. But I knew the name would mean something to you." I couldn't move, couldn't blink. I just kept seeing that grainy smile, the way he stood behind Ivy like a shadow reaching toward the light. "He was dead," I whispered. I heard he died in Angola." June's face was unreadable. "Turns out the devil has 9 lives. He did 10 years and disappeared. Word is he's been building something bad. And now he wants Ivy." I dropped the photo like it might burn me. Raymond Goss. I hadn't thought about that name in 35 years. Not since I was 26. Not since that summer on the riverbank when I watched him wrap a length of fishing wire around another girl's neck while laughing like it was a game. Her name was Connie, and no one ever found her. He saw me watching, and he let me live. "You knew him," June said. It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. "He was my first." Her eyes widened. "What?" I was 16, dumb, lonely. He was older, sweet at first. Bought me sodas. Said I looked like a movie star. I paused. He put his hands on me before I even knew what no was supposed to sound like. I had buried all of that, deep so deep I'd built entire rooms inside myself just to keep the memories from leaking out. I left him the night after Connie disappeared, I said. Never told anyone what I saw. Never went to the police, just ran. Right into the arms of the next man who didn't love me either. Tommy. June was shaking her head. Why didn't you tell me? I laughed, bitter. Because shame is a cruel thing, baby. It makes you think silence is safer. She sat down, hard, like her legs had given out. So now he's found Ivy, I asked. After all these years? He doesn't forget, June whispered. He didn't forget you, and he sure as hell won't forget what I did to him. What did you do? June looked up. I stole something from him, something he thinks belongs to him. The room felt like it had no air. Not Ivy, I said. Her silence said everything. He thinks she's his. I stood, rage rising in me like heat through floorboards. She's not, June said quickly. God, no. He never touched me, but he wanted to. He said if I didn't give her to him, he'd burn everything down to find her. And then she looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in years. I don't care what it costs. He doesn't get to win again. A long silence. Then I asked, what's the plan? She opened the drawer and pulled out a small, rusted pistol. Nothing fancy, just enough to say she wasn't bluffing. I'm going to meet him. My blood ran cold. You can't. I have to, she said. But Ivy stays with you, no matter what happens. I wanted to scream, to lock the door, to drag her out of that motel and force her to disappear. But I knew June. She got that stubborn fire from me, so I just nodded. Then I'm going with you. She hesitated. No, you don't get to decide that, I snapped. Not after sending for me. She looked like she might argue, but then Ivy stirred in her sleep. She whimpered, said something I couldn't quite hear, and June's face crumpled. Okay, she whispered. You can come. But if anything happens, she added, you run. You take Ivy and you don't look back. And I said what I hadn't said in over 30 years. I promise. Even though I knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. We met him at the edge of an old lumber yard, half a mile outside town, where the trees stood like crooked sentinels and the air smelled like damp wood and gasoline. It was dusk, the time of day when everything looks both alive and already gone. Ivy stayed behind in the motel room with Rafe, June's friend, though he looked more like a man who'd buried more than one secret out in the woods. He didn't say much, just nodded when I handed him the motel key and whispered, "You don't let her out of your sight." He didn't blink. June drove us in a borrowed truck, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were bone white. I sat beside her, the pistol wrapped in a towel between us. Neither of us said anything for the first 10 minutes. Finally, I broke the silence. "What are you going to do?" She didn't look at me. "Whatever I have to." I reached for her hand. She flinched, and then let me hold it. That was the first time she let me touch her since I arrived. We pulled into the clearing and saw the car before we saw him, an old black Lincoln windows tinted too dark, idling with a purr that sounded like a throat clearing before a threat. And then he stepped out. Raymond Goss, older now, heavier, hair white at the sides. But the eyes, those eyes were still the same, flat, cold, like something that had stopped pretending to be human a long time ago. "Well, well," he said, smiling like a man who'd already decided the ending. "Hello, Ellen." I froze. He looked me up and down like I was a newspaper article he'd already read but liked rereading. "You look good," he said. June stepped forward, her voice like a razor. "She's not part of this," he chuckled. "She always was. You think I didn't know? You think I forgot what your mama saw?" I stepped between them before I even realized I was moving. "I should have spoken up back then," I said. "Should have dragged your name through the dirt. But I was young, scared." Raymond smiled wider. "And now you're old. Still scared?" I looked him dead in the eye. "No, just angry." He moved closer, slowly, like a hunter circling. "Where's the girl?" June held her ground. "Safe. She's mine." "No, she's not." He tilted his head. "She's got my blood." June's voice cracked. "She doesn't." I made damn sure. "Doesn't matter," he said. "She's the last thing I have left to claim. And I don't care if I have to go through both of you to get her." His voice was calm, too calm, and that's when I knew he wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to take, by force. June reached for the towel-wrapped pistol. I caught her wrist. He saw it, and moved faster than I thought he could. There was a struggle, gravel flying, shouting, the gun skidding under the truck. And then a crack, loud. Sudden. June stumbled backward, clutching her shoulder, blood blooming through her jacket. I screamed. Raymond raised something shiny in his hand. Another gun. Smaller. Hidden. "You think I won't kill you both?" he said. "You think I won't bury you in the same dirt I left Connie in?" And that was it. That was the word. Connie, the girl from the riverbank, the one whose name I hadn't spoken out loud since 1977. And in that moment, I stopped being afraid. I dove for the pistol. Fingers closed around cold metal, rolled, fired. The shot missed, but he flinched. And that gave June just enough time to kick the second gun from his hand. She was bleeding, staggering, but her eyes burned like wildfire. "Go ahead," she hissed. "Hit me, shoot me, but you'll never get near her again." He hesitated, and for the first time, I saw it. Doubt. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Because then, a third voice rang out. From the woods. "I wouldn't try it if I were you." Rafe, holding a shotgun. And behind him, small, scared, but fierce as anything, stood Ivy, hands clenched into fists. And all at once, Raymond Goss wasn't the monster anymore. He was just a man, cornered, outnumbered, and finally, done. He didn't run. I expected him to. Men like that usually do once the spotlight finds them. But Raymond just stood there, chest heaving, eyes scanning each of us like he still believed he might come out on top. "You're making a mistake," he said. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It cracked at the edges, like ice underfoot. "I don't care," June spat. Her shoulder was bleeding bad, but her grip on the pistol never wavered. "You don't get to decide what happens next." Rafe stepped closer, shotgun leveled. "Hands on the hood, Ray," slowly. Raymond didn't move. "I've got friends," he snarled. "You think this ends with me?" "No," I said quietly. "It ends with her." I turned to Ivy, still standing behind Rafe, wide-eyed, the wind knotting her curls into a tangle. She looked at me, then at her mother, and something in her changed, like a door inside her finally unlocked. She stepped out from behind Rafe, walked up just far enough that we all held our breath, and she said, "I'm not yours." 4 words, but they carried 30 years of silence, 30 years of fear and hiding and pain. Raymond sneered, but his hands started to shake, and then Rafe cocked the shotgun. "Now," he growled. Raymond dropped his weapon. We called the sheriff. He didn't say much when he arrived, just looked at the 4 of us, the gun, the blood, and the man who'd once thought he was untouchable, now cuffed and trembling in the back of a cruiser. Turns out there were warrants, old ones, new ones too. Raymond had a habit of vanishing just long enough to hurt again. But this time, he didn't get away. June collapsed as soon as they drove off, not from blood loss, though the bleeding had slowed, but from something else, something older, like the past had finally let go of her shoulders. I helped her into the truck. Rafe drove. We took her to the hospital in the next town, where a nurse with kind eyes and a soft accent stitched her up and called her honey without a trace of pity. Ivy didn't speak for a while. She sat beside me in the waiting room, her tiny hand wrapped around 2 of my fingers, like she was testing whether I'd stay. "I used to dream about you," she whispered finally. I turned to her. "I didn't know what you looked like, but I thought maybe you were real." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I just said, "I dreamed about you, too." When June woke up, I was sitting beside her hospital bed, holding her hand like it was something I'd never get to do again. She blinked, dazed, then focused and whispered, "You stayed. I told you I would." She closed her eyes, just for a moment. Then, quiet as a breath, she said, "I'm sorry." And that broke me, because I wasn't waiting for an apology. I never was. I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "No more running," I said. She nodded, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. We'd survived the fire, but healing was its own kind of battle. We stayed in Ashbridge for 3 more weeks. The hospital released June with her arm in a sling and a bottle of pills she never finished. Ivy and I picked her up in Rafe's truck, and I'll never forget the way she looked when she saw us waiting, like she'd expected to come out into nothing. But we were there, not because everything was okay, but because we wanted to be. We rented a small cabin on the edge of town, just 2 bedrooms, a crooked porch, and a coffee maker that coughed more than it brewed. Ivy claimed the smaller room and filled it with crayons and thrifted books and 1 stuffed rabbit with half a face. June slept a lot that first week. I cooked, Ivy colored, and in the evenings we sat under quilts and watched the snow melt. She started calling me Nana on the 4th day. Just like that. No ceremony. She said it between bites of toast. "Pass the jam, Nana," like she'd always known me. And maybe, in some way, she had. The first time I cried wasn't in the hospital or in the yard behind the lumber mill or even on the bus to Maine. It was in that kitchen, holding a jar of strawberry preserves, because I realized I had something I never thought I'd get again, a second beginning. June and I didn't talk about Raymond much, or Tommy, or the long stretch of silence that lived between us like a ditch we'd both fallen into and spent years pretending wasn't there. But sometimes, in the evenings after Ivy went to sleep, we sat on the porch with tea in hand, and the conversation would drift toward the edges of it. "Do you remember that old willow tree near the trailer park?" she asked one night. I nodded. "You used to swing on the tire rope until it frayed. I thought if I swung high enough I could disappear." She didn't look at me when she said it, and I didn't say anything back. Some pain doesn't ask for words, just presence. Spring came early that year. The first thaw brought rain, and the first rain brought wildflowers poking through the cracks in the gravel drive. Ivy picked them and pressed them into napkins. She made me a card. "To Nana, you came back. I keep it in my Bible. I read it every morning." Eventually, we left Ashbridge, moved south, not back to Louisiana, too many ghosts, but somewhere quieter where the winters were kinder and no one asked where we'd been or what we'd survived. June got a job at a diner, just weekends to start. Ivy enrolled in a school with a swing set and a librarian who looked like she'd walked out of a children's book. I joined the church choir again. My voice is thin these days, but I sing anyway, because some stories deserve a song. We don't talk about the photo that brought me back, but I still have it. Framed now, it sits on the shelf beside a drawing Ivy made last month. Stick figures, 3 of them, all holding hands, labeled in crooked marker. Me, Mama, Nana. 30 years of silence. 30 years of guilt, of shame, of not knowing if I'd ever be more than a memory someone tried to forget. And then, one photo, one girl, one impossible second chance. We're not perfect. God knows we're not. But we're here, we're trying, and most days, that's enough. Because sometimes, the people we think we've lost forever, they're just waiting for the right moment to come home.